are sending Drew Holiday to Portland for Anfernee Simons and 2 second-round draft picks.
Breaking news out of the association surrounding the Boston Celtics.
The Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks.
50 for Jaylen Brown. This is Pritchard time. The crowd can sense it. Over 3 Bulls.
Great in and out dribble. Oh! He set off the smoke detector.
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to a live bonus episode here on Your Celtics Source 2 days before the NBA trade deadline. And I was just sitting down to go live and talk about the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade to the Utah Jazz. And then we were going to talk about James Harden and the potential that he could move out and go to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And then there was one more trade, Jaden Ivey and Mike Conley going to, I believe, Chicago, along with going to Chicago and the Pistons freeing up and the Wolves freeing up, and maybe that was a starting point that Giannis might potentially go to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And then we get the news just about 10 minutes ago here that Anfernee Simons has been traded from the Boston Celtics to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Nikola Vučević. And we're going to get into my thoughts on Anfernee Simons, my thoughts on Nikola Vučević. You know, there are pros and cons to both sides of the trade here. I will just say I believe there was a second round pick on both sides in this trade, so I believe it sort of cancels out here. So it's basically just a straight up trade for Anfernee Simons and Nikola Vučević. And I think we'll start with the Anfernee Simons side of it, and then we'll get into what Nikola Vučević brings to the table. But before we do that, please like and subscribe, follow on social media, take part in the poll that's in the live chat right now, what you think of this trade. I believe I have 4 options in there: yes, no, wait and see, or salary dump. And there is definitely a salary dump to this trade, right? Anfernee Simons was making $27 million a year, which is just not, an appropriate amount for the type of player he is, especially in the salary cap NBA era, where teams cannot be affording to pay guys like that who are, coming off the bench. Even if you are in the candidacy for 6th Man of the Year, with Anfernee Simons definitely was, right? He was definitely a valuable player to this team, but you can't play $27 million for a guy like that, coming into the season was definitely one-sided, right? He played absolutely no defense despite being an all-worldly offensive talent, at least from just putting the ball in the basket. Right? He might not have had the playmaking and other things that, a guy like Luka Doncic or Trae Young to a lesser degree has, right? But he definitely could put the ball in the basket, which is one of the hardest things to do in the NBA. So, the Celtics, with Anfernee Simons, I think it started slow this season. Obviously, he was, getting acclimated to a new team, learning to play actual defense for the first time. But over the last month or so, he has just turned it up to just another notch, coming off the bench each and every night and giving you 20 points. Really just a spark, very similar to what Peyton Pritchard did last season when he won 6th Man of the Year. Anfernee Simons has moved up into that 6th Man of the Year sort of odds. I think the 6th spot is exactly where he is at the moment, or at least last time I checked. And you get a guy, or you have a guy now that is filling the offensive spots that Derek White, was struggling to fill this season, at least from the scoring point, right? Derek White is doing a lot of other things that are contributing to winning each and every night. But he was struggling shooting the ball. And, part of the success of the season, despite Jayson Tatum not being here, despite all the trades over the summer and the free agents leaving, was the fact that Anfernee Simons was able to come in and fill that gap in the scoring production, especially off the bench. And now you get a guy in Nikola Vučević who does not bring the same type of offense to the table, but he fills just a void in the center depth for the Celtics. And we didn't know what the Celtics were going to do in the trade deadline. The Celtics historically are very secret along what types of moves they make. We really never know what's going on. That's part of, one of the successes and, benefits of, Brad Stevens and the Celtic organization as a whole, is that they're able to keep things secret, which allows them to make trades that other teams wouldn't allow to be and quote-unquote fleece the league, as Brad Stevens loves to do. And this is not one of those trades, right? I don't think it's a trade where, either team, necessarily won the trade. I would argue that the Celtics probably have a little bit of the upper hand, but to be honest, I'm torn. And we're going to do probably another video or two, another podcast episode on this trade. After the trade deadline, we're going to do a full NBA trade deadline reaction as well. But I just wanted to take the time to do my initial thoughts on this video here. And I'm pretty torn because I actually love the role that Anfernee Simons was starting to, acclimate to. That he was starting to be just a fantastic guy off the bench and carry your team to wins on some nights when the offense from the starters isn't going well. We saw that game in Miami where he had 30-plus points coming off the bench and single-handedly carried the team back from being down 20 or whatever it was. And throughout the month of December and January, he's just been a great addition to an offensive, or at least a team that was struggling offensively in the month, right? I believe, right, the defense was a major problem, in the first couple months, and then the offense struggled. And in January, they've been a great defensive team. That hasn't been the problem, but they have taken a little bit of a step back. Not a huge concern, but a little bit of a step back offensively. Right, some of these games being a lot closer than they needed to be against the Nets. Ultimately losing to Atlanta, to Chicago. Some of these games that you could have won if you had a little bit better offense. And I don't think the Celtics would have been anywhere close to how they did in January without the production of Anfernee Simons. Because Jaylen Brown, he did win Player of the Month, thankfully, because he should have won it in December, and he got snubbed by Jalen Brunson, and he showed his, emotions after that game and went out against the Clippers and dropped 50. And then, he should have won it this month, and finally, he gets the credit that he deserves. But that's a conversation for another day. He was the only one that was, playing well offensively in the month of January. Derek White, Sam Hauser started well, but he had dropped off. Derek White continues to just shoot the ball horrifically. I do think that's going to get better. I think it has to get better now because, right, transitioning over here to the Vučević side of the trade is he's not your, number of, one option off the bench, scoring-wise, right? I think he will, I don't know if he'll start or not. I'm not sure he will start. I think they might go with Keita still. But Vučević provides something that, Keita and Garza, provide sometimes, but not consistently, right? And more importantly, Vučević is that depth behind the center rotation that is very thin, right? We were wondering, we've seen Amari Williams over the last couple games sort of come in and play a small role when Keita or Garza have been in foul trouble or just needed a rest. And we were wondering how that's going to go in the playoffs because the Celtics, I don't think they could survive, 10, 15 minutes a night without a true center out there, right? We saw them try and do, play without centers early in the season when Keita and Garza were struggling for sure. And it worked, but then teams started to catch on. And over the last month or two, Joe Mazzulla has realize the need for a traditional center out there at all times, right? Which is why we see him playing Amari Williams when Caden guards are not on the court, because you need a center. Despite how well guys like Ugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh have played this season, you need a traditional center out there just for rim protection, and Vučević is going to be able to provide that. And that allows the Celtics to play with the center at all times, and that's going to be great for the Celtics defense, but also offense, spreading the floor, getting Derek White better opportunities for open shots, because I think we saw, Queta, Garza does shoot threes, Vučević does shoot threes, Queta doesn't, and so, Derek White, I think he struggled with getting wide open shots, and that really played a factor into his, not confidence, because he's always been confident, but his ability to knock down shots. And now that you don't have Anfernee Simons, Derek White has to become that at least number 3 option offensively, maybe behind Peyton Pritchard. But he has to be scoring 15 plus points a night on consistent shooting for the Celtics to be in games. And I'm not worried about him doing that, because now he has that the space, or he's going to have the space, which Vučević able to shoot threes consistently as well. He's going to have rim protection behind him defensively, although Derek White's obviously a great shot blocking guard for his side, arguably the best shot blocking guard in the NBA. But offensively, he's going to have the time now to make shots at a consistent rate. And I think, who knows what Jayson Tatum's going to do? We still don't know if he's going to come back. But I think one of the questions was, with Jayson Tatum coming back, was Anfernee Simons, because they play very similar roles. And obviously Jayson Tatum is going to take the majority of the minutes from Anfernee Simons if they are in conflicting positions. But who knows how that would have settled, right? We don't know, if not that Tatum would be upset or uncomfortable in the position, but would Anfernee Simons and Jayson Tatum be able to get along playing so similar roles and playing, sort of basically replacing one another? And I don't know how that would have sat. And now that Anfernee Simons is off the team, I have more confidence that Jayson Tatum is going to come back, because he doesn't have to conflict with any players on the team in terms of ball usage and position besides Jaylen Brown. And we all know that, despite all the rumors that, he doesn't want to come back and, mess with the groove that Jaylen Brown is in this season and how he's carrying this team. But that being said, we all know it's worked before. They won a championship this way, despite maybe Jaylen Brown being the better player overall in those playoffs. We know that it can work, and that it has worked for 7+ years and counting. So I'm not worried now about the ability of Jayson Tatum. Not that I ever was, but I think Jayson Tatum needs to know that, he can come back and be productive, even if he's at, 85%. We're at the 30-game mark. We're at 30 games left, right? We've reached 50 games into the season. I'd like to see him back on the court for 20-plus games before the postseason. And that would probably put him at the start of March, which I think is a great spot. And I don't know if there's a setback with Jayson Tatum. There might be. That might be the reason that he's now, rethinking it, because I'm not sure he really thought that he was actually going to come in and mess with what the Celtics had, knowing the player that he is. So there must be some setback that's holding the back. And if that is the case, right, it's a totally different story on how this rest of the season looks out, or sort of, plays out here, and how the playoffs go. Because right now, they are a 3 seed. They're tied technically with the New York Knicks, but don't have the tiebreaker. And we play the Knicks coming up in just a couple of weeks, actually. I believe in a week. Maybe it's next Sunday. I'm not sure exactly. But we play them, and so, we have the chance to reclaim that 2nd seed. And I actually think, right, we saw the Pistons get rid of Jaden Ivey. Now, I do think the Pistons are going to go out there and get a shooter, because they need a 3-point shooter. just so, because they really struggle shooting the ball sometimes, and that's been their problems over the last, couple of years here, right? When they've fallen short, especially in the playoffs last year. They had a great first round, but they fell short ultimately because they just didn't have enough offensive production in crunch time. And Cade Cunningham's been terrific, and he is definitely a top MVP candidate along with Jaylen Brown and SGA and whoever you want to put in that list right now. But they sometimes fall short in the, in close games, right? They haven't had a lot of them, but in close games, they have sometimes struggled because of their inability to, shoot three-pointers consistently. And so if they go out there and get a shooter, they'd automatically be the number one favorite to win the Eastern Conference. But as it stands, I don't think the Celtics or the Knicks, for that matter, are that far behind because they all have the playoff history, right? They all have the confidence and the at least production in the playoffs over the last couple of years, so they know how to get it done, at least the Celtics do, and you have a little bit more consistent offense, assuming Derek White shows up, than the Pistons have, and you put Jayson Tatum back in, I think the Celtics could be going to the NBA Finals when it's all said and done in a year that was supposed to be a gap year. And while it hurts to get rid of Anfernee Simons, I think now having a playable center at all times on the court, which allows, Queta and Garza to play more freely, or even not play more freely, but, don't have to worry about getting into foul trouble, which allows them to play confidently and, contest shots. And ultimately, if they do foul out, you have a guy that you can go to, and that allows the Celtics to stay in contention in the minutes, or at least, stay even, win some of the minutes that Queta is not on the floor. But, I'm going to wrap it up here because we are going to be back tonight, really late tonight after the Celtics take on the Dallas Mavericks. We will have a reaction to that game. On Wednesday, we will have a reaction to the Houston Rockets game, and back-to-back here. And then we have the NBA trade deadline. And we're going to do a full recap of the NBA trade deadline Thursday afternoon. I don't think I have the time set yet. It will probably be around 3:20, something like that, right after the trade deadline is over, or at least the deadline closes. So we will do an instant reaction there. And then, heading into Sunday, we have Patriots coverage, Super Bowl coverage. We're going to do a pregame show live at about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon before the game starts. And we're going to have coverage throughout the week for any trades, any injuries, both Patriots, both Celtics. So any coverage surrounding the Patriots or the Celtics or the NBA as a whole, we will do an instant bonus episode like this one. So, without further ado, please like and subscribe, follow on social media, check out this podcast and all podcast episodes on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. Please give a rating and review there. That would be really appreciated. And until next time, go Celtics and go Pats.